Hold on. Let me get out my Adventures in Odyssey Bible to
There we
look up
go.
this verse
There
to
it
see
is.
what the available at
God, we
talkingtotomatoes.com.
can't get we can't get through one damn episode without Jubilee cracking open the
Without
Bible.
me, I'm actually sponsored by Focus on the Family.
Welcome to Talking to Tomatoes, the podcast where we talk about the Christian children's media we grew up on, not only for the quality but for the pernicious propaganda behind it. My name is Eric Eberly.
And I'm Jubilee Alexander.
Today we've got part 2 of our interrogation of our interrogation of the
Interrogation?
yeah, that was it. And I was going for something else, but I was also making up words with Candid Conversations with Connie and the please put that terrible art down. You're
Come
welcome.
on, look how big their heads are.
Look how big their heads are. Look how their necks
The artwork,
could in no way support their giant craniums.
their heads are as long as their torsos.
Hang on, I'm doing a thing. Yeah, no. Nope, that doesn't quite work.
Very scientific. Eric was measuring his head versus the length of his torso.
Yes. Anyway,
Yes,
so this is an Adventures in Odyssey like spin-off book about one of the characters, Connie Kendall. Is that her name?
that sounds right.
I think so. And she's one of the characters, and it's structured. For those who didn't watch at part 1, where we kind of started into this. It's an advice book specifically like for girls, which we of course once we saw that we were like slathering over because we assumed that it was going to be terrible. But before we get into whether or not the second half is terrible or not, what's making you happy this week?
The Artemis launch. I know last time I talked about Tofu the snake in our recording that got lost, but yes, in April
Don't they
of
splash down here in like?
2026.
We're totally now getting off track because aren't they? Don't they splash down here in like 20 minutes?
That's a great question. Yeah, you looked that up. So yeah, the Artemis space craft is coming back from the moon. They successfully went around the dark side. I was literally had to delay driving home because I was crying at a TikTok discussing how the crew of the ghosts of the crew of the Challenger and Laika, the Russian space dog, are all watching over Artemis as it comes back from the moon, and I was getting emotional. And it's cool to see that we can do cool things. It's not something that hasn't been said a million times in a million ways, but it's really cool to see them go back to the moon. And
Yeah, not to interrupt the happiness and all of this, but I do have to say, as a kid who was absolutely obsessed with the Apollo missions and space flight in general, as a kid, I do have to say that there's been a whole lot of content that's kind of pissing me off, where they're like, "Did you know?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I've known this for 35 years." What do you mean? Like we have pictures of the dark side of the moon. This is not. We have not seen it before. Like it's okay. Like relax. But
there's some new
the,
stuff because it's like, whoa.
yeah, cameras have gotten better in the last 50 years, and like we're seeing a level of detail that is, oh my god, just like mind blowing. Um, but yeah, I mean, me too. The Artemis. I saw I think it was a press conference with them before they took the astronauts before they took
Yeah.
off, and there was this whole one of the guys was saying, he's like, boy, this might come off the wrong way, but I hope, like, what are their hopes for the mission was the question that was asked, and one of them said, but boy, this might come off the wrong way, but I hope we are forgotten. I hope we are a footnote in the future of which is like you do first you go, oh my god, why would you say that? But it's like, if the plans happen like as they're expected to, this is like the start of a regular like moon bases, and as a pretext for Mars bases, potentially even a Venus base and all this stuff. And so it's like, if you look back from a future, where would this exist as there was this weird thing, we went to the moon, then we waited for 50 years, and then we started going back and built a base. And it's like, yeah, someone somewhere will probably be like, did you know, 50 years from now, people making content will be like, did you know that the names of the first astronauts? And people will be going, is that true? Because the whole point is, if the glorious future is as we people like us hope for, this will simply be a footnote of, and then we started going back to the moon after a while. But yeah. So we're sitting here, recording a little bit before splashdown. No wait, I think the
Splashdown's
splashdown.
supposed to happen today.
No
Or
wait, I
did you
think
look?
is that
I told you to
tomorrow.
look that up while I was talking.
I got distracted. No, it's tomorrow. Okay, so it's
Oh,
tomorrow.
okay.
Good. So we're not gonna all of a sudden start crying in the middle of it when they're like, they're back, they're safe.
Oh,
Yes.
there's a.
So this. So
Well, let's bring our focus to more terrestrial pursuits.
earthly
Um,
concerns.
in the first half of the episode that we did for the first half of the book, um, I think we were surprised at the quality of the book. Like it kept it kept taking turns in directions where you expected them to veer hard into. I mean, everything from disordered eating to, I don't know, man, read the Bible. Um,
Yeah.
and yet again, this chunk of chapters, the last few chapters here, opens up with a banger. Such a banger, in fact, that I decided to research how did this get made? Who is the person behind this? Um, which requires a lot of looking into um the Library of Congress data inside of here, because there's no author listed. There's no, you know, there was no information about an author, but there's a foreword in here. Says for my daughter Jaslyn.
Because we had been talking and we are like, surely this was a book made by committee. Some Adventures in Odyssey writers were just sort of slammed together and be like, oh, I don't know, what do girls need to know? And now make it in the, in the, from the perspective of the character Connie.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense the way there's little snippets written by other characters. It's kind of an in-universe thing. That would make sense if this was a writer's room kind of a deal. But there is an author. The author is Kathy Buchanan, who is a staff writer for Adventures of Odyssey. Um, she's written a lot of kind of advice-centric books for girls. She has a degree from a accredited university, which I think surprised both of us. But it's in biblical counseling, which I think is the main reason I looked this up when I started this chunk of the chapters was the very first chapter, absolute banger. Like a level of advice that I wish I had access to. Not, I was making jokes at the beginning, and audience, in case you don't or didn't notice, I'm transgender, so I was very much raised as a boy. But my joke was, oh, look, I've got advice on how to be a girl. But I literally could have used some of the advice in here, not just because I am a trans woman, but it's good advice.
Yeah, you read me this before we got started, and I was like, whoa, check that out.
The chapter starts with a little bit of a dud, just a very long, oh, here's a really difficult situation, and it's when I broke up with my fiance Mitch, which you Odyssey heads will know is the non-Christian that Connie dated in universe. But it's a long metaphor about, yeah, it's not a metaphor. It's a long story about how everything reminded her of Mitch, but in order to hide from her feelings, she started to watch TV, and it eventually became a problem because she wasn't dealing with her feelings. That not TV necessarily being a bad thing, but she describes it being a way that uh, a way that she would hide from her problems.
Yeah, basically like a distraction, something to keep her from being
A
alone with her
distraction that
thoughts.
then became a unhealthy amount of distraction where people had to start calling her out, which, well, that seems like a very grown-up problem and frankly a pretty odd way to handle that. It goes into talking about how as you start to grow up, your body goes through changes, and they took a while to use the word hormone, so I thought they weren't going to. And again, I got impressed where they were like, hey, you've got hormones. They're starting to come out. You're going to get a lot of a lot of intense feelings. And as someone who takes feminizing hormones, I'm literally, I am actually taking this advice and going, oh yeah, those first like 6 months when your hormones are going, are first starting to change are nuts. And I had the advantage of having a very medically consistent supply of hormones. Like one day the T stopped and the estrogen started. And people who go through your initial biological puberty, you tend to have a lot more spiking levels of hormones. So I was literally like, that's really good advice. And again, could have used that when I was, you know, I would cry about nonsense out of the blue and just think the world was ending. And
Yeah,
now that you speak
thank
of
God at
hunger,
least the levels were consistent. Like
yeah,
imagine if they were like in this month we're giving them a bottle of placebo so they can experience the lows with the highs.
woof. We're gonna give you a deliberately terrible puberty. um, After the section describing all of the problems and all like how you're gonna feel and how everything's gonna feel like the world's falling apart, you're gonna get mad at people and you're gonna cry. Rather than take the hard right into like stop sinning, it it goes to a level of depth of mental health and like mental health might even be too far. Like it's a mental respect
Hmm.
almost of like respect yourself, respect the way you are feeling, and the points that she goes through are remind yourself that it's temporary. You're not going to feel like this forever. A lot of things that feel really important now are not going to be important, which might start to come off as a little, don't worry, this won't feel important. Which to someone who's reading, I imagine a little kid reading this and feeling like the world is falling apart, the next step, like that would feel dismissive of those feelings if the next step was not your feelings are important. It says if self-talk doesn't help you, or you can't snap your fingers and change the emotions welling up inside of you, cry if you need to. Hit a pillow if you're angry. Talk to your mom if you're feeling confused and don't know what to think about something. But don't feel like you need to bottle up your emotions. Bottle up your emotions, I'm pretty sure, is what we were raised to do.
Right,
Like, if
right.
there's one thesis well, it would just bottle up bad emotions for sure.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, that is crazy good advice. We had a good little laugh about Colorado Bible College, and we're like, yeah, sure, this is going to be. Oh no, apparently it's accredited.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right?
apparently biblical counseling is like a real thing, and
I mean, if it's accredited, it must be at least somewhat rooted in, like, maybe even just.
sh- surely she had to
And
take
again,
some classes on like actual mental disorders
counseling.
and
Yeah.
mental health and stuff like that.
Therapeutic practices. Yeah, the next step is like remember that you are totally normal. Everyone from Albert Einstein to Taylor Swift experienced adolescent mood swings. Your parents, teachers, and even your pastor went all through this. Billions of people have traveled this path and survived. Which, again, yet again, would be a really good place to leave it, but it goes a step further, which again I do remind myself this was written in 2014, not the 1995 when a lot of the episodes we're listening to are from. So I was shocked to find out get the next section says getting help. Visiting a counselor or psychologist can be extremely helpful. I just end the book right there. Hey, therapy can be good.
Yeah,
And although
yeah,
you might
really.
feel a little nervous talking to a stranger about personal stuff, it's nothing to feel embarrassed or worried about. And then it goes into other way, like if you don't do that, it talks about journaling. It talks about exercise to deal with your emotions. It recommends eating happy food. Like, give yourself a little treat. It's so shockingly good that it's just this good that it's recommending ways to deal with the problem. Like the problem, and yeah,
Uh,
a lot of 10-year-olds don't have serious problems. They sure felt like the end of the world when you're in the middle of them, though.
I mean,
Um,
I was gonna say that's probably one of the hardest lessons I have had to learn as a parent. Is it's like, yeah, they're freaking out because if you're lucky, dropping your ice cream is the worst thing that has ever happened to that child. And in the same ways, boy, you had some friends, and then interests changed, and now you're feeling abandoned by them. Dear God, if you've never been abandoned by
Those were
someone
some
in
of
the
the first
lost,
friends you ever made.
yeah, you're the first friends you ever made, the first connection you felt to someone outside of your family, and now it's gone. Yeah, that's gonna feel bad. And so to have actually good advice. I mean,
What was you were saying something when we were talking about this earlier about making sure we don't have our blinders on, and
well,
can you talk about what
what
you were
I was
telling me?
what I was thinking is, again, no one's probably more surprised than us that an advice book from Focus on the Family for girls is not absolute trash. Now, we might want to balance our scales by going and reading something that Dobson actually wrote in the 80s or the 90s for something truly what I'm sure would be what we had in our minds for that. So with that sort of approach in mind, like we read this book and it's good, and then the first place my mind goes is to how the hell did this come to be? And obviously we don't know, where we're in the writer's room. I doubt we could email Kathy and say, how the fuck did you get this book made? But it's like,
What I get though, what if we could?
well, yeah, what a
What's
get.
Kathy Buchanan up to?
What are you up to? You want to talk to us? Um, was like, it almost felt like, because this is an advice book for girls, maybe the people involved in some half baked. I don't know if it was like a half baked measure of well, this is maybe we like the actual smart thing to do, which is like, maybe a woman should head up this project, or is it them, the stuffy old boomers at Focus on the Family not wanting to have to edit a book about girls' problems, which, again, we're sort of following this little little rabbit trail of assumptions about what they might be thinking, being like, oh, this is an advice book for girls. It probably talks about puberty and bras and periods. Like, I don't want
I
to
don't want to
hear
read
about
about
that.
bra.
Yeah, so I just don't know how something like this got past the censors, because again, this does sort of feel like a book that, from the world of Focus on the Family that we know, that dads wouldn't have gone through this book and go, I don't want my little princess to know about therapy, or whatever. But
Well, so that's a good chapter. It's genuinely, I think, one of the I feel like you could read the very first chapter and this chapter and have I guess the chapter about food that again I expected to go. The chapter about food had one phrase that says obesity. It said obesity is bad, or maybe overeating is bad, or something. But in general, it was focused on health in the way. But if you just mix those three chapters together, you'd have a great little pamphlet for little little girls. Unfortunately, the next two chapters are not it. They're not. The next three chapters are not quite as good. They're kind of straightforward, but there are some good points. And again, I rather than being super hardcore and super Bible focused, their next chapter is when mom and dad spill mad, and that chapter is just about your parents, about being upset with your parents, and it talks about them being wrong sometimes. It talks about them not being perfect, which again usually is a your parents aren't perfect, but you gotta do what they say because the Bible. There was one section here that was quite good where they're in one of the many there, I wish there was a better name for all the little asides, the sidebars, the B plots of the chapters. There's not a great word for it. But in this little aside, there was a conversation between Connie and this person who was like, I wanted to go out with my friends and the my parents wouldn't let me." And Connie asks, "Why well, what did you tell your parents?" And she says, I've been really responsible. I've been doing good in school. I got all my chores done. I even did all these things. And Connie goes, "So did you tell them that, or did you just complain?" Because and that person was like, "Oh, well, I did sort of just complain." And they're like, "Maybe you should try not, not having this confrontation with them, but like presenting it like that." Which was, presenting
Uh,
an interesting, positive communication.
yeah, yeah, no. I
Um,
mean, communicate with your parents. What a novel concept.
Communicate your parents not. They are the tyrant of your life, and you should thank God that they are that. So the next chapter is called Sailing on the SS Friendship, How to Be a Good Friend. And it does have a little bit of a banger at the beginning. It's another very short chapter, but it has this story about this person, Tamika, and her friend Jillian. They were two kids. These two kids are in a science class together, and they have a lot in common, and they like science, and so they start hanging out and become friends. And they describe in interesting detail over several pages how Jillian is a little bossy, and Tamika's starting to realize, we kind of only do what Tamika likes, and outside of science, we don't have a lot in common. And when I try to give her the benefit of the doubt, and or I try to defer to her, she's happy, and she doesn't like to spend time together when we're not doing what she wants. And she's presented as having a choice when she realizes that Jillian is bossy and I don't like this about her. It says I have three options. I could look for new friends, put up with Jillian's tantrums and keep signing up for things that she liked, not me, or I could talk to her about how unhappy I was and see if she was willing to change. And it kind of immediately is like, look, I know what the right answer is. It's number three, but that's a hard thing to do. But we need like these are conversations that we need to have. Like friendship is not a one-way street. And then it goes on to describe how Jillian hears her, she is sorry, she respects it, and she's not perfect. Jillian doesn't immediately change for the like in the way that they would, in the 20-minute Odyssey episodes, which is a radio drama. So it's
Like a perfect fable sort of
yes,
way. She
yes.
would she would have been like, "I'm sorry," and she never did it
Oh,
again.
I will change my ways. And she Ebenezer Scrooges and is suddenly the perfect person. Yeah, it says, and Jillian's not perfect about it all the time. Every now and then I have to just be like, hey, you're getting a little bossy. And it was just beautiful. It was like, oh, cool. Like that's a cool way to do that. That's a way to do friendship. I need to get better at that with my
I was going to
friends.
say that's conflict. That's a level of conflict resolution that, yeah, would, yeah, could probably benefit from that myself.
So the chapter 11, the last one in this section, sorry, chapter 10. I know you're all keeping track of this, but chapter 10 is about words can hurt you, and it's about having conversations that matter. And it's a little bit of a confusing chapter because the first couple pages are just a story where Connie is like making up wild stories to be interesting. And then it's found out that they're all lies, and then people don't listen to her stories for a while. And it's like, yeah, man. Okay. That's definitely
Okay,
something.
yeah, I got it.
Then it hard pivots into from death to life. There's a really powerful Bible verse about words. The tongue has the power of life and death. Which was like, whoa, that's um oh, the tongue has the power of life and death. Proverbs 18:21. And then Connie continues, in almost every conversation we are either speaking life or death. And I at that point I go, hold on. Let me get out my Adventures in Odyssey Bible to
There we
look up
go.
this verse
There
to
it
see
is.
what the available at
God, we can't, we
talkingtotomatoes.com
can't get, we can't get through one damn episode without Jubilee cracking open the
without
Bible.
me. I'm actually sponsored by Focus on the Family. They haven't figured this out. I am getting my bag. Hold on.
Shh.
No, that is all a joke. I bought this from a secondhand bookstore. So I decided to look up this verse to be like, what's this? What's this about? Because the context usually makes a lot of sense.
I've got it open too, and yeah, the context is unhelpful.
Yeah, so verse 21 says, what you say can mean life or death. Those who love to talk will be rewarded for what they say. And it's like, oh, okay. So the one before it is what you say affects how you live. You will be rewarded for how you speak, which is it's a couplet because the verse 22 is a man who finds a wife finds something good. So
Thanks.
this is chapter 18 is one of those classic proverbs. It's a bunch of aphorisms kind of just plugged together. So yeah, for a place that usually doesn't do such a hard biblical pivot to your words are life and death, when what they're talking about is just speaking nicely, not speaking nicely, but like conversations. And again, useful just makes it sound so utilitarian. Like talking isn't about more than just conveying information. It's about like socializing. And I've heard really interesting theories about how gossip is actually a form of power for the underprivileged. There is a fantastic podcast called Normal Gossip. It's very popular. They don't need this plug, but they're getting it. But Normal Gossip, they have like, as much as it is a messy podcast about messy stories where they deliberately change the names, even though if you know those people, you will know who they're talking about. They actually have a very strong opinions about how gossip is like for a long time was the way that women exerted power in a world that didn't give them any. Is like, well, we can socially tear down, a cheating husband or like a cheating abusive husband or you know
A shitty
if someone is
family or
stealing
something.
money from their their siblings or their parents, we can gossip about them. Or if someone is taking advantage of someone else who has more like actual power than them. So it's a little this was a connection I kind of just made at the end where I'm just like all the examples are framed as deliberately being mean, whereas telling about someone who did something bad could like there's a world in which that's important. So I don't know. This just this
Yeah,
this
yeah.
feels
Say
like a kind of manufactured problem, which
the
is
fact that something that sharing information hurts someone because the thing that they did wasn't like publicly known is not that's not you hurting them. That's them hurting themselves. And I mean,
well, and all the examples are like your sibling disagreeing with you, and your aunt, your like mom said I could choose. They have this chart, and there's like some examples of like what someone says to you and how a bad and a good response, and they are comically black and white, where what they say. But mom said I could choose the show for tonight. And your bad answer is you're the worst sister in the world. I hate you. Or, yeah, I got to choose yesterday. But do you mind if we watch one that we both like? It's like, okay, like these are yes. Oh, we're saying I hate you, not the good answer. Like there's other ways to do it. Like there's even a more nuanced version of this that could be about communication, which coming straight from the other chapter was like they had examples of like decent communication.
yeah,
So
this does just
this chapter's
feel
kind of a dud.
it's a dud. And it feels very out of place. I don't know if there's anything. I don't know if there's anything in here because whenever what is this BibleHub.com. I actually kind of like it because when you pull up a specific verse, it shows you like 25 different translations. Um, and this particular one is very weird to me because they're all the same. Like usually it's like you get down to the Good News translation and the New Heart English Bible and the Webster's Bible and they're like
Oh,
so far so different, like have traveled so far. I don't think there's one of these that doesn't say life and death, which again, this is like a probably a question for someone who could like read the.
what an extreme! Like, is it a classic that, or is the language that black and white? I mean, with that many translations, it kind of feels like the language is very black and white. Which, if you worked backwards from let's write about this Bible verse, it's actually interesting. Is like, oh wow, the language in here is very straightforward. But then that might not be a great Bible. That wouldn't be the best Bible verse to talk about is to talk about gossip and slightly changing the tone. Because if you use that as the basis for your theory of communication, like a biblical theory of communication, it's really extreme and it makes everything. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say?
if
Like,
it's a life, if it is life and death sort of a thing, this is not a this can't you can't have a subtle theory of communication about like, hey, that's a. I mean, because I feel like that's an odd approach because
well, again, I'm just saying. But really, what it should be is you should be writing a chapter about speaking kindly and building on the communication tools in the previous chapter. So it feels very weird to use this example of which clearly must be more metaphorical of.
Well, I mean, the verse before, you know, I mean, like it is obviously sort of meant to be a metaphor, because I mean, because A, it's the Bible, and B, it's because verse 20 is from the fruit of his mouth a man's belly is filled, and with the harvest from his lips he is satisfied. So they continued, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Those who love it eat its fruit. So it's like, it's just bringing it all back around. But Stevens, God,
No,
now that
so
I'm
what
reading that together, even that the life and death thing goes. We're talking about fruit,
I
metaphorical fruit,
so
but still.
I think probably, and again, this is making it even less applicable to what this chapter in this children's advice book should be about, is from the harvest your belly is full, life and death come. I mean, it's poetry right there, which is probably why the words are black and white, but the meaning is, again, you're like, okay, this is very big picture kind of Bible verse. It's a very poetical Bible verse, but it's not necessarily yeah, your words are literally going to kill people, are going to damage life, or it will rejuvenate it. Is probably not the be all end all of communication and what words can do. I I think that might be the one thing that maybe almost gets, maybe having all those translations is, I this is such an interesting philosophical idea of, is having too many translations right there communicating more than is actually intended.
Communicating
You know,
kind of a consensus of meaning that might not be there because it's just like, well, I mean,
well,
he said
consensus of text, not consensus of meaning, because again, but meaning is deliberately vague, and I'm sure lots of people who love debate would probably finding this interesting, and everyone else is bored to tears because they're like, "Where's the advice?" And well, we're at the end of the advice because
the
that's
book's
the
over.
end of the chunk of our chapters.
I mean, we kind of already went through it, but it is just such an odd thing to come from them. It's like it's like, yeah, I really do want to. Oh God, but I also don't want to because you've now read a book, which means it's my turn to read a book, and I don't want to read something that James Dobson wrote in the 80s or the 90s.
Woof.
That will be high level Patreon donor content if and when
If
we get a
someone
Patreon.
gives Eric $100, he'll read some old book where they mailed letters in and he compiled the ones that he wanted to answer, and he's probably just ranting to his secretary and she's typing.
Yes,
Um
Dr. Dobson.
yes, Dr. Dobson. So, big picture. You kind of were asking me earlier about how I feel about this as a general piece of work. And speaking as someone who genuinely struggled with a lot of the things that they're talking about of as a little Christian kid who was sure didn't feel like being good all the time, this would have really genuinely helped me and made me feel less worthless and less sad and less alone. And I think in the grand scheme of things, not hating yourself and feeling like a you are worse than growing up in Christianity already makes you feel. I think this is ultimately a good thing to exist in the world and good thing to exist in their canon. And I'm glad it's there. I hope some little kids were able to read it and feel better about themselves.
Yeah, because I mean, again, the world that we grew up on is one where jokes about mental health and, you know, therapy, advice, self help, kind of a thing was the way that you just that was just par for the course. You just have those locked and loaded for anything, and so for there to be like obviously, and obviously we're not like mental health. We don't even have degrees in biblical counseling, let alone any other kind. So it's possible that there's
Biblical
some
or real counseling.
biblical or real. We don't have it, but so it's possible that there's something maybe in this that we're missing, but also, like you were saying, this is something that would, if we had known this, if a version of this had existed for boys, and we had seen it and taken it to our parents and be like, hey, can we get this? Can we check this out? Can we buy this? Whatever sort of a thing. The fact that it is an Adventures in Odyssey book would have probably bypassed any sort of, from their perspective, like critical lens to be like, what's the weirdest thing that it could possibly tell our kids? It's an Odyssey book, for God's sake. And therefore, like you said, I think this is a good thing to exist, because there are probably people who are, maybe a little more on the fringes of things that are like, boy, life is really hard, but I can't let some East Coast liberal tell me about, oh, what about a Adventures in Odyssey staff writer from Colorado Springs? Yeah, we could let them tell them about it, and then they actually get some good advice. So yeah, I think this is a surprisingly, boy, we need to we should read some stinkers, because we're finding too much to like, and some
I wanted this to be bad, damn it.
Give worse advice.
So I think we should get back to some vanilla Odyssey for a little while you decide what terrible book you're gonna read next.
What am I going to subject myself to? Yeah, we can get to that, and also some exciting news before we kind of go into our usual outro stuff. This podcast is now available on Apple, the podcast store.
Oh, we're in the big leagues now.
And Spotify. All episodes are currently available. You've probably heard this from people before, but especially as we're just starting out, please like it and subscribe and leave us some reviews and stuff. That makes the little algorithm bots happy, and then more people come.
Turn it on, turn the volume all the way down if you don't like the sound of our voices or can't tell our voices apart. That's been a problem in the past.
Because I've only gone back and watched the video versions, and so it's kind of easy to tell. But I think we talked about it in episode 1 that we tried a couple of years ago to do a podcast, and literally we could not hear. A couple
years ago? Try like 2 decades ago.
It wasn't 2 decades. We were just out of college.
Yeah, okay.
2 decades ago, but more than 15 years ago, we tried to do it. We tried to do a different podcast, and our voices
did not work.
Absolutely identical. We could literally finish recording, and I'd turn around and start editing and go, "Who is talking?" It kind of sounded like an insane person talking to themselves, and then our third one of our friends who was doing it with us would just every now and then pipe in with a little something, and we're just riffing off of each other, but it sounds like
that fool is talking so much.
Shut up and let the other guy talk. Please go and check those out on whichever platform you prefer. And I don't know how Spotify works because I've literally never used it, but I'm sure there's likes.
It's probably great.
I don't know. maybe it sucks, but yeah, go check it out. Add it to your playlists. Let's be on your Spotify Wrapped. I know that's a thing. You can also watch the show on YouTube at Talking to Tomatoes, or we also have a TikTok where we post some clips and stuff. That's Talking to Tomato. And then we have individual TikToks. And we'll have links to everything in the show notes below. But my individual TikTok is eric.eberly.
And you can find me on TikTok at Titan of Joy. I'm also on Instagram, same handle, Titan of Joy.
Talk to you later, tomatoes.
And I'm Chris. Kathy Buchanan has escaped containment. Remember, your body is disgusting and sinful, and you should feel bad about it, and yourself. Only God can save you, and He might. Maybe, if you're good enough, you're not, but He will still consider it. Rest in peace, Dr. Dobson.
Kathy's coming through the walls!
Oh shit! The light man!